Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ully, and if this is your first time then welcome, if it's not then welcome back. So today's video is going to be a follow on from my previous video, which was about the fact that certain foods can basically cause a sort of a chronic state of inflammation inside the body, which can eventually lead to all sorts of different health problems, and has also been linked to eczema and other autoimmune skin problems. Today's video is going to be a more in-depth video about the pro-inflammatory foods versus the anti-inflammatory foods, the foods that you want to avoid and the foods that you want to have more of. So on the pro-inflammatory food list, as in the foods you want to avoid, we've got 8 culprits, and these are things you want to avoid in your day-to-day diet. I'm not saying cut them out completely because that can be quite unrealistic, but just things in your day-to-day diet you just really want to try to minimize as much as you can. So the first on the list is sugar, and particularly white refined sugar. So this means everything that sugar contains, so things like sweeties, things like chocolates, and things like, you know, cakes and biscuits and all these very like white refined sugary things, very, very sweet things. You want to avoid these as much as you can. Secondly, we've got too many white refined carbohydrates, so things that has white flour in it. So this can be things like white bread, it can be things like, again, cakes, it can be donuts, it can be biscuits, all these kind of things that have white refined flour in them, because this has the same effect as lots of sugar in your body. It has an inflammatory response, and they're particularly bad if it has sugar together with it, which is often the case. Number 3, you want to avoid certain oils. Now, oils can be a little bit confusing because there are sort of good oils and bad oils, and there's a lot of debate around whether oils are even good for you at all, but there are certain oils that you really want to avoid, and these are oils that have a high level of something called omega-6. So you've heard of omega-3s, you've heard of omega-6. Omega-3s are good for you, omega-6s less good for you. And these are things like vegetable oils, these are things like canola oil, these are things like palm oil, these are things like sunflower oil, all the sort of cheap oils that you find in those big plastic buckets, usually in supermarkets. And those are just really not very good for you at all. So following on from oils, you want to avoid fried foods, because these have obviously been soaked and prepared and fried together with exposure of really extreme heat. It's a very inflammatory combo. You really want to avoid these. So this is things like fried meats, this is things like chips, which is fries in American, but also chips, which is crisps in the UK. Very confusing. Basically, you know what I mean, like the sort of the oily things that you get either in like fast food places, or you get them in packets and they've been fried in oils, or you get them in sort of like junky restaurants. These are the kind of things you do not want to have. Next on the list is margarine. Margarine contains something called hydrogenated fats, which are basically very unstable fats. These cause inflammatory reactions in your body, and if you're gonna eat margarine, you might as well just eat butter, even though I don't really advocate that myself either. But basically, margarine you really want to stay away from, and these are especially bad because they are marketed as healthier, as in they've got less saturated fat and that kind of thing. So people think that they're good for you, but actually margarine is really bad for you. Next, we've got processed meats, meats that come out of packets, meats that you find in junk foods, meats that you find in sausages. These kind of meats are not good for you. They have been proven to be linked to lots of lifestyle illnesses, including cardiovascular diseases, that kind of thing. On top of the fact they usually have a lot of saturated fats, which is another reason why you really want to avoid them. But on top of processed meats, you kind of want to avoid anything processed. So these can be sort of processed non-meat alternatives. These can be things that just are generally in packets and has a lot of ingredients, a lot of strange ingredients that you don't really know the name, or you don't know what it is, like sort of scary looking ingredients. These are things you really want to avoid. They contain a lot of chemicals, they contain a lot of sort of very synthetic, very unnatural things that our bodies just don't like. They don't really know how to process them, and that is why you cause a sort of inflammatory response. And finally on the list, I've talked about this before, is alcohol. Alcohol is inflammatory, and I would strongly suggest cutting down on it as much as you can. So those are all the things that are pro-inflammatory, the things that cause inflammation in our bodies, and things that we want to avoid as much as we can on a day-to-day basis. But then on the other hand, we've got all our good foods, all our anti-inflammatory foods, and especially if you eat lots of these and a little bit of the naughty things here and there, then you shouldn't have any problems. So first on the list is vegetables, and especially if you get a big variety of different types of vegetables and lots of different colours. You can literally go crazy on these, and particularly good for reducing inflammation are things like tomatoes, things like broccoli, and especially dark leafy greens. So things like spinach, things like kale, things like Swiss chard. These are all really good and will protect you from any excess inflammation in your body. Second on the list, we've got fruits. Loads of fruits are anti-inflammatory as well. Again, try to get lots of different colors, so you're not just eating bananas and peas, and just try and get as many colors as you can. And especially with fruits, you want to eat lots and lots of berries and a lot of fruits that have that sort of the dark blue or the dark red colour. These are very, very anti-inflammatory. So these can be things like cherries, things like blueberries, things like strawberries. All these things are really, really good. Red grapes as well is another one. But like I said, with all fruits and vegetables, you want as many different colours and as many different types as you possibly can fit into your diet. Next on the list, we have fresh herbs. Now, fresh herbs generally are very good. So there's things you can add, things like basil, you can add things like thyme, you can add things like cloves. But in particular, there are two very, very good herbs that are very, very anti-inflammatory, very strong anti-inflammatory. And the first one is ginger. Ginger is very good. It's also very delicious, especially if you put them in smoothies and desserts and that kind of thing. And the second one is turmeric. Now, turmeric is one of the most powerful anti-inflammatory foods that you can find. But the thing about turmeric, and you have to remember this, is that you have to eat it with pepper because your body doesn't absorb it very well. So if you're going to eat the turmeric but not eat any of the pepper, then you might as well kind of not eat the turmeric because your body won't absorb any of the benefits. So just bear that in mind when you're adding turmeric into your foods. Next on the list that is anti-inflammatory is olive oil, and especially the sort of the good quality, usually quite expensive olive oils that you find like in farmers markets or like cute little, I don't know, Italian food shops. So this is a big staple of the Mediterranean diet. For those of you who don't know what the Mediterranean diet, it's the kind of diet that people in the Mediterranean often eat, and they have been shown to have lots of low levels of cardiovascular disease and all sorts of lifestyle problems, and they often live longer and healthier lives, and they eat a lot of olive oil. Now, like I said before, I know that there is a lot of confusion around oil, and some people say that no oil is healthy and that oil is absolutely not a health food at all, but I personally don't believe this. I think the evidence supports the opposite, that actually there are certain types of oil that are very good for you, and they contain a lot of monounsaturated oils and fats which are very protective of your heart and very anti-inflammatory, and I think olive oil is one of these. Plus I think that oils taste good and I want to enjoy my food as much as I can, so do you know what, I'll take the risk. So number 5 on the list is certain types of nuts, in particular almonds and walnuts have proven to have anti-inflammatory properties. Next on the list we have beans, lentils and pulses, which is pretty much a staple plant-based protein. These also have been proven to have anti-inflammatory properties, protective of your heart, slow release energy, and also better for the environment. Next on the list is avocados. Avocados are a great source of healthy fats, they're super yummy, and they also have anti-inflammatory properties, so go crazy on the avocado. And lastly on the list, a little sweet treat is dark chocolate. Now the higher the percentage of cocoa? The higher the percentage of the chocolate, the better, because this will have less sugar and more of the anti-inflammatory, antioxidant properties that is found in cacao. So that was a good anti-inflammatory list. If you've got some kind of anti-inflammatory disorder, if you've got eczema, if you've got skin problems, if you can add these in to your diet, then you are good to go. And if you can avoid the other things as much as you can, even better. So that was all for this video. If you liked it, please give it a like, please subscribe, and I'll see you again very soon for another one.